So let's jump right into this. TensorFlow version 0.9.0. Let's go to this web page, which is right here. Traditional JavaScript. Okay, so this is all about the new async and await keywords. And this is how you would see it on a typical page. Typical page would probably separate the script from the HTML. So this part right here is HTML, this part right here is script, but I'm including it all in one button so it's easier to teach. By the way, this script tag, super important. It loads the version of TensorFlow. You are welcome to delete that part, run it again, and see what version it's running and whether it still works. Things eventually get deprecated. So in the script tag, we have a regular JavaScript function, but this is an async function. Inside the async function, we have, I can't see it, where is it? There. We're awaiting for this result with the data. I'll be explaining some of this tensor stuff later. You can have a look at it. But the basic idea here is the async function. Inside this button, most of my code is done this way. Inside the button, I call the function, and the output goes into these divs. I've given some numbers there so they don't coincide with other divs. Your output should replace these three dots. Let's move on to another one. Here I've written the typical function again. First of all, see if it works. Okay, let's have a look at the code. Once again, we've got our script tag. But here we have the function declared inside the button. And this means we're not using a script tag. This actually has a huge advantage here with this update and run, because script tags can't update and run, whereas once it's inside this button, I can change anything here, click update, and it'll actually change it. Notice, let's click here, put a bunch of 4s there, click update and run, it works. On this one, if I put a bunch of 4s there, click update and run, it doesn't change it because it's inside the script tag. JavaScript only loads scripts information once. So this system, which I prefer writing like this anyway, works better. Anyway, back to your async function. It's just a typical function inside a button. Nothing fancy there. There's some tensor stuff. It's all going to be the same. We'll explain that later on. So here, this is the kind I prefer. It's an inline async function, has a little bit more code. First of all, check that it works. But check this out. It's not a named function. Let's go back to that other one. It had a name. It had a function name, and I called the function. Well, in an inline, it just works inline. So right away we're into here. Now notice that there is an extra bracket and then another bracket, which is kind of defining a function. It's kind of a trick to get inline to work. I really like this way of writing it. Now on a lot of the code in TensorFlowJS, they use arrow functions. I'm okay with arrow functions for my own code. I just don't like teaching it. The arrow replaces the word function that would go right here. And I find my students get a little bit confused, so I'll stick to the one I like. A reminder, this is all about the async keyword, and way over here, it's awaiting for the data to return from the GPU back to the CPU as that's as a tensor array. Okay, so moving on, let's throw all these together. The output is saying the main function, inline function, arrow function. Let's have a look at the code. There's your main function called from the button. And what do we have here? This looks like the inline function, so you're setting a variable to be the inline function. We're having another variable being an arrow function. Look at that. That gets a little confusing. And then we're just printing out the myInline, which is activating the inline function, and myArrow, which is activating the arrow function. It's kind of like a named inline function here. So that's just something that goes on in a lot of these bits of codes we'll watch. Okay, what's this? Multiple variables. Totally confused me. Never done it before, but in some of this code we're going to be seeing, they return information as an array. So let's have a look at the code. Here's a typical array that's defining two variables and functions returning information. So what's actually happening here, it totally confused me seeing the code, is that number 3 is going to my x, that number 4 is going to my y, and when I print out here between single quotes, it's just writing that. There's my x, my y. Let's go back to the code. My x is 3, my y is 4. Okay, some of you might be familiar with that. It kind of confused me. What actually confused me more, same sort of thing, but they're returning it as an object, which means it's squirrely brackets defining it, not an array. So there's my foo and my bar, same kind of thing, but it's returning. This looks like JSON format. The descriptor and the value, the descriptor and the value, but those descriptors are actually variables, and here we have it. My foo, this is just writing to the screen, and my bar. Right there, my foo equals the value passed to my foo, and my bar equals the value passed to my bar. Anyway, thought I should throw that at the start. Now this is something interesting. I could convert the JavaScript, the Tensorflowjs code to run in the web browser, because modules kind of work. Only problem is they don't work when you install, when you dump the code onto your own computer, because of CORS issues, cross-origin resource sharing, which strangely on your own computer it won't allow you to use 2 files from your own computer. So it kind of screws up. Anyway, this is my solution to it. Instead of using modules, which can name, well, like the TF dot, which we'll be running into, we can create namespaces. So here's the namespace. It creates it. If it's already been named, it uses the old name, or it uses an object. And then you can create a function with this namespace name, and when you're printing it out or activating it, use the namespace name and the function. Makes it really sweet. A lot of my example of the TensorFlowJS examples use namespaces when needed. Okay, a lot of when you're calling script tags, you don't actually have to use a namespace. You don't have to call a function with a dot, but sometimes you do. So that's it. Let's get on with the tutorials.